inexorably faithful to their task. They hold his nature's sequence in their guard, carrying the unbroken thread old lives have spun. Attendants on his destiny's measured walk, leading to joys he has won and pains he has called. Even in his casual steps they intervene. Nothing we think or do is void or vain. Each is an energy loosed and holds its course. The shadowy keepers of our deathless past have made our fate the child of our own acts. And from the furrows labored by our will, we reap the fruit of our forgotten deeds. But since unseen the tree that bore this fruit, and we live in a present born from an unknown past, they seem but parts of a mechanic force to a mechanic mind tied by earth's laws. Yet are they instruments of a will supreme, watched by a still, all-seeing eye above. A prescient architect of fate and chance, who builds our lives on a foreseen design, the meaning knows and consequence of each step, and watches the inferior stumbling bowers. Upon her silent heights, she was aware of a calm presence throned above her brows, who saw the goal and chose each fateful curve. It used the body for its pedestal. The eyes that wandered were its searchlight fires. The hands that held the reins, its living tools. All was the working of an ancient plan, a way proposed by an unerring guide. Across wide noons and glowing afternoons, she met with nature and with human forms, and listened to the voices of the world. Driven from within, she followed her long road, mute in the luminous cavern of her heart, like a bright cloud through the resplendent day. So which way are we reading, Rosa? You will begin? Yes.
Inexorable, faithful to their task, they hold his nature's sequence in their guard, out
carrying.
carrying their unbroken thread-old lives have spun.
Thread, a thread. We spin a thread and then we use this thread to weave something. So this is these dim hooded Godheads. They are inexorably faithful to their task. Inexorable. It means that they don't have any softer feelings. They just have to follow their task, whatever it requires. They are faithful to that mission. And they are assigned to each human being. And they hold his nature's sequence in their guard. They are holding on to and protecting the sequence which is demanded by his nature, the outer part. He's going to explain why he uses this word sequence. They are holding on to that. A sequence is one thing after another. They are carrying the unbroken thread old lives have spun. And he's going to explain that also. It's as if life after life we are spinning the thread of our nature. And that thread, it doesn't get broken. And we may leave the body, but that thread continues. Dhanalakshmi.
Attendance on his destiny's measured walk. Leading to joys he has won and pains he has called. Even in his casual steps they intervene. Nothing we think or do is void or vain. Each is an energy loosed and holds its course.
Yes. So these are attendants, servants who are waiting there to do what is necessary. And what they are attending and looking after is the course of each one's destiny. And that destiny follows its path with a measured walk. It takes time, an even pace. And this walk leads to joys he has won, different kinds of enjoyment and happiness that have been earned by whatever he's done in the past, and pains he has called. He may have done things which have painful consequences, so he will have to face those painful consequences.
We have called that.
What?
We have called those pains.
We have called those pains. Yes. Yeah. So this here he's expressing something of the theory of karma. No? Yes. Of the law of consequence and effect in our lives. The trouble is that we don't remember, and so we are not aware that we've caused these various things that happen. But here he says, even in his casual steps, they intervene. Even in the little things that we do or that happen to us that seem meaningless. No, they don't seem to have any particular significance. But Aurobindo says, nothing that we think or do is void, is empty, or without effect, in vain. Every thought and every small action is an energy loosed. And when he uses this word loosed, the image is of an arrow. You know, there's an arrow which is the archer is holding, and he lets it go, and then nothing can stop that arrow. It's going, and it holds its course. It goes straight into the future where it has its effect. So when it says each here, this is each thing that we think or do, no? Is an energy loosed and holds its course. And these are like the controllers, the guardians of that whole process. Martin.
The shadowy keepers of our deathless past have made our fate the child of our own acts, and from the furrows labored by our will, we reap the fruit of forgotten deeds.
Mm-hmm. So I think these are the shadowy keepers. They are the guardians of this past, whatever we've lived so far, that is deathless in the sense that it goes on having its effect. Mm-hmm. And they have somehow made our fate that we've created for ourselves by our actions. So our fate, of course there are different senses of this word fate. One, the ultimate sense of it is what our soul has chosen, the path, the way that our soul has chosen. But we also choose it in other ways. The nature chooses by doing certain things. It creates the circumstances that our conscious being will have to face in its development. So they have made our fate the child of our own acts. And from the furrows labored by our will. Furrows, when the plowman goes out with his plow, he creates furrows, and in those furrows the seeds will be planted. So in French the verb to plow is labourer. Here he uses the word labored. We've created with our will, that unconscious will of ours, we've created these furrows, and later on we have to reap whatever has grown there in those furrows that we've made. The fruit of our forgotten deeds. Those are the seeds that we put in the furrows. Would you like to read?
But since on seeing the tree that bore this fruit, and we live in a present born from an unknown past, they seem but parts of a mechanic force, to a mechanic mind tied by earth laws. Yet are the instruments of a will supreme, watched by a still all-seeing eye alone.
Yes. So we are not aware of this going on because we don't see the tree that has grown out of those furrows. We don't see the tree that has borne the fruit of our own acts. We live in this present. The present is, of course, born from our past, but we remember only a very, very little of our past. The past is 99.9 unknown to us. So when things happen to us, it seems to us, to our surface minds, to our mechanic mind, which is governed by the laws of earth, the laws of matter, the laws of physics, these things that happen just seem to happen like that because that's the way the world is. And yet, he says, that's how they appear to our surface consciousness. But in fact, these fruits are instruments of a supreme will. They will not come to us unless that supreme will has sanctioned it. And so all this is being watched by that still, unmoving, all-seeing eye above, which is governing our unfolding. Ganga Lakshmi.
A prescient architect of fate and chance, we build our lives of foreseen design, the meaning, knows and consequence of each step, and watch the inferior standing powers.
Yes. So there's an architect, a designer, who is using these factors of fate, all those things which seem to be determined and unavoidable, and chance, the things that happen, just the random things. He's a prescient architect. He's seeing ahead of time. He's seeing into the future. And he's building our lives on a foreseen design. The design has already been made. This architect has to see that everything gets built according to the design. He, that architect, knows the meaning and the consequence of each little step in our lives. And he is watching these inferior stumbling powers, the powers of nature, who are not so prescient and who make mistakes, our nature parts who are limited and don't see the design. But he's watching them, and he's allowing for what they do, adjusting things so that the plan still gets followed, even though the powers that carry it out are unconscious and subject to error. So that's one of the very interesting passages in Savitri about karma. So that's what he has to say about these dim hooded Godheads. Now he goes back to Savitri. You'll read, Shiv?
Upon her silent heights, she was aware of a calm presence thrown above her brows, who saw the goal and chose each fateful curve. It used the body for its pedestal, the eyes that wandered where its searchlights fired, the hands that held the reins, its living tools. All was a working of an ancient plan, a way proposed by an unearned guide.
Yes. So Savitri is aware of this calm presence seated above her brows here. That calm presence sees the goal, although she does not see the goal. And that it's that presence which is choosing each curve, every turn of the road, because those are meaningful choices. They are leading her to the predestined goal. That presence uses the body, the physical body, as its pedestal, its material base. And it uses the instruments of the body. So when her eyes are looking around and seeing all these different scenes, that consciousness, that power of consciousness above, is seeing through them. Those are its searchlight fires, seeing what it needs to know. And her hands holding the reins are its living tools. The reins are the way that we control the horses, no? Through the hands, the decisions are communicated. And all this was the working of an ancient plan. This is a plan which is pre-existent. It's been set for a long time. And this way has been proposed, set before her by an unerring guide, guide with a capital G, that power which cannot make mistakes. Joel.
Across wide noons and glowing afternoons, she met with nature and with human forms, and listened to the voices of the world. Driven from within, she followed her long road, mute in the luminous cavern of her heart, like a bright cloud through the resplendent day.
So here she is crossing the spaces of time, the noons, the mornings and the noontides, the glowing afternoons. She's meeting nature. Later on we'll get some description of the landscapes that she passes through, and she meets human beings, human forms, and she listens to the voices of the world. She must meet people and speak with them, hear what they have to tell her. So in this way, she's being driven from within. She follows this long road, and within she is silent, mute, in the luminous cavern of her heart, in this cave full of light, which is her heart. And if we see her from outside, she's glowing. She's like a bright cloud as she moves through this resplendent day. These are Indian days, bright, blazing, burning sun. In fact, it is summertime when she sets out. That we know that, we're told that from the story. Justin, you would read, please.
At first, the path ran far through people's tracts, admitted to the lying eyes of states and theatres of the loud art of men. The carved chariot with its fretted wheels flitted through glamorous Mars and Sentinel towers, past figured gates and high dream sculptured fronts, and gardens hung in the sphere of the skies. Pillared assembly halls with armored guards, small fanes, where one calm image watched man's life, and temples ruled as if by exiled gods to imitate their lost eternity.
So now Aurobindo is giving a wonderful poetic description of the kind of things that she sees. And he says at first her path ran for a long way through territories, tracts, areas which are inhabited, peopled. And she goes from one city, state, to another. This is how it was in the far past in India. Each city would be a state. And so he says each of those capital cities is like the lion eye of its particular state. And in those cities, these are theatres, these are places where the loud act of man, all the powerful activity of human beings is going on. And there's her carven chariot with its fretted wheels, so even the wheels have been beautifully carved. Fretted, it means intricately carved. It threads its way through clamorous marts, marketplaces, bazaars, where there's a great deal of noise going on, and past sentinel towers. When you enter a city, there will be watch towers. You have to pass by them. past figured gates. There will be gates to the main buildings and high dream sculptured fronts, the facades of beautiful buildings, sculptured, wonderfully built, and gardens hung in the sapphire of the skies. He speaks of hanging gardens. In cities, this can happen, no? That on the roofs or on the balconies there are beautiful plants hanging down. So you look up to the skies and there are these gardens. And there are assembly halls with many, many pillars, yes, columns, and they are guarded by armed guards. And then very small shrines. A fane is a sacred building. But these are small ones, little places where there's just one calm image seated, only one idol there, and the presence within it is watching the human life going on all around. And then on the other hand, there are huge temples, temples that are, it looks as if they have been cut out of rock by exiled gods to imitate their lost eternity on a huge scale meant to last forever. So these wonderful small shrines and big temples. Emily, would you read?
Often from gilded dusk to argent dawn, where dew lamps flickered on frescoed walls, and the stone lattice stared at moonlit boughs, half conscious of the tardy listening night, dimly she glided between banks of sleep, at rest in the slumbering palaces of kings.
So this is what happens at night. Of course, if she comes to one of those cities, she will be entertained in the king's palace. She's a princess, no? So from that gilded dusk, the golden twilight lit up by lamps or by the golden light of the setting sun, to argent dawn, the silver dawn, the first silvery light of dawn. She's sleeping, resting in the slumbering palaces of kings. She sleeps and the palaces sleep, no? And in those palaces, jewel lamps flickered. Of course, there will be oil lamps inside. They flicker, no? And the lamps are have probably metal lamps with different colored stones inset, no? So the light of different colors, beautiful, rich colors, flickering on the walls of the palaces, which are painted fresco. A fresco is a painting that's made on a wall. You know. In the temple in Tanjavur, they've discovered some very old paintings on the walls. They've got covered up or darkened, but recently they've uncovered them. And the stone lattice, of course, they didn't have glass in their windows in those days, I think, but they had wonderfully carved stone openings, jalis we call them. So, looking out through those lattices at the boughs of the trees outside, which are lit by the moon. She's half conscious to the night tardy, passing slowly. No? Dimly she glided between banks of sleep. I often think that the night, or the time that we sleep, it's like a journey. And he uses this image here as if she lies down and the bed becomes a wonderful ship that carries her from the evening to the morning, from the gilded dusk to the argent dawn, between as if down a river, and on either side are the banks of sleep. There she is, taking her rest in the palaces of kings. At the night time, they are quiet, slumbering. And then the day comes and new scenes, Mahalingam.
Hamlet and village saw the faith line pass. Homes of a little bent.
Of a life.
Society. Homes of a life bent to the soil it plows for sustenance of his short and passing days. That hence him keep the old repeated course, unchanging in the circle of a sky, which alters not above a mortal tide.
Mm-hmm. So then when she sets off on her journey again, she passes through the hamlets, the small settlements around a farm, villages. They see the fate wain pass. This chariot which she's driving is carrying fate with it. A wain is an old English word for a cart or a carriage. So when she passes the peasants, those hamlets and villages, those are homes of a life of toil, a life bent to the soil that it plows, that it's cultivating. It has to cultivate the soil for sustenance, to sustain its short and passing days. The lives of those hard-working people may not be very long. They pass without leaving much trace, really. Their lives are passing, transient like that, but they keep always the same repeated course every day, unchanging under the circle of this sky, which doesn't change, the unchanging sky above our mortal toil. Sergei?
Away from these thinking creatures, burdened hours, to free and griefless spaces now she turned, not yet perturbed by human joys and fears.
So now she turns away from the peopled tracts, away from this thinking creatures, burdened hours, this the thinking creature is man, and man always seems to be carrying a heavy load of some kind with him wherever he goes. Now she turns to free and griefless spaces, out into the undisturbed spaces of nature, places that have not yet been perturbed, disturbed by human joys and fears. Virgin nature. Verbal, will you read?
Here was a childhood of ordinary earth. Here timeless musing large and glad and still. Man had forgone as yet to fill his cares. Imperial across was the eternal soul, and
wind stirred.
Grasslands winking in the sun. All mid green music of woods and road hills.
loud, rough.
And the grooves murmurous, the air moving wide, or past the long lapsing voice of silver flutes, like a swift hope journeying among its streams, hastened the chariot of the golden bridge.
The golden bride. Savitri is the golden bride on the way to her marriage. No? So here was the childhood of primeval Earth, the Earth as she was originally, in her early times. And in those open, undisturbed spaces, timeless musings, as if there's a consciousness there which is in a kind of dreamy trance, which doesn't note the passing of time much. Large and glad and still, undisturbed and peaceful. And there's a kind of tranquil happiness, glad. These are places which men have not yet filled with their worries and anxieties, their cares, had forborne. It means they've been patient, they haven't gone yet and disturbed there. So there, imperial acres of the eternal sower. Acres is a word that we use for farmland, no? But these are eternal acres. The person who's farming these acres is the eternal sower. The Creator is sowing his seeds there. No? And there are wide open grasslands. And if you see open fields of grasses, they move. They create a kind of play of color. He says winking. You know, it's like you are fluttering your eyes. The colors of those grasslands are changing as the wind moves over them. So there are those open spaces, or there are woods, green musing of woods, and rough-browed hills, not high mountains, but hills, and they look as if they've got shaggy eyebrows, no? And because of the bushes and the plants that are growing on them. And among the trees and the plants, there are groves, open spaces, and a typical sound there is the sound of bees gathering the nectar. No? So this the murmurous bee air, the air seems to be humming with the sound of the bees. Or she passes rivers, the long lapsing voice of silver floods. There are these lovely rivers where the water is pure and silver, and of course they make a sound as they move downhill, lapsing. It means falling. So the voice is, the sound is moving downwards. There she is, hurrying along in her chariot, the golden bride, and it's as if she's a swift hope journeying among its dreams. All these things that she's seeing that are like dreams she's passing through, but there's always this hope that she will find what she's looking for. So she's going swiftly. She's not wasting time. She's moving swiftly on her way. Suresh.
Out of that world remains human past, track memories and
ageless
rem-
remnants.
remnants came. Domains of light.
Oh, this is a difficult word, huh? Enfiefd. Enfiefd.
Enfifed to
Antique calm.
antique calm. Listened to the announcement.
Unaccustomed.
Unaccustomed sound of hooves and large diminutive
Entangled.
Entangled silences. Absorbed her into secrecy.
Yeah, good.
And slow, hushed, wizard plates of fiery gloom. Ended on with the cloud sinner her wheels.
Yeah, so you got a lot of difficult words there, huh? Yeah. So as she travels, it's as if something's coming out of the past, the time when there were no human beings, out of the world's immense unhuman past. There was such a long time before there were any human beings, no? And now the spaces that she's traveling through seem to be like memories of that time before there were any human beings. These are memories in the form of landscapes, tracked memories, memories of landscapes, ageless remnants. Remnant is something that's left over, a piece of cloth, or here it's a piece of time that's left over, that is ageless. It's so old we can't say how long ago that remnant has come from. Domains of light enfiefd to antique calm. So what she's seeing are regions that have their own special light, and this word enfiefd, it's a word from the old medieval feudal system, when there was a ruler and then there would be sub-rulers and they ruled over another lot of sub-rulers. So it means that what is ruling those domains of light is a calm from the far, far distant past. Antique calm is ruling over those domains of light. And they are listening to the unaccustomed sound of hooves. The horse's hooves make a sound, no? And those spaces are not used to hearing any sound, no? And these large, immune, entangled silences, these are silent spaces, and they are immune, they are safe, they can't be damaged, and they are entangled. There are many plants growing there, and there are no, they are tangled together. Of course, there must be a road that she's following, but beside the road, these entangled spaces, things growing that you can't get off the road. You have to follow it. No? I remember years and years and years ago when I was in the United States, in the north of New York State, passing through areas, I really felt nobody has stepped into these forests since the dinosaurs, you know, it was like that. No human foot has ever passed here. Something like that she's experiencing. And these silent spaces, they just absorb her into their emerald secrecy. Emerald is a very vivid green color. So he's telling us that these are forests, woods. You know. And there are even flowers, slow, hushed, wizard nets of fiery bloom. This word bloom, it refers to blossom, to flowers. It's as if these flowering plants are trying to catch hold of her wheels. They are surrounding with their colored snare her wheels. Many, many flowering plants as she goes through. Nergis.
The strong, importunate feet of time fell soft along these lonely ways. His tightened face forgotten, and his dark and ruinous round.
Yes, so the strong, importunate feet of time, something that's importunate, it's insistent and it won't stop insisting. So for us, time is like that. You know, time's always moving on and it moves us along with it even if we would like to linger. You know. So there he is. But here in those spaces, he's not like that. His feet don't make that hurrying sound. They fall soft along these lonely ways. And the tightened pace, those strides, huge hurrying strides that time makes, there they are forgotten. And his stark and ruinous rounds. Time moves round and leaves ruin behind him. But there in those timeless spaces, untouched by human life, it's not like that. Everything is unchanging, timeless, and the pressure of time is not felt in the same way. Patricia, you'd like to read?
The inner ear that listens to solitude, leaning, self-wrapped, unboundedly, could hear the rhythm of the intenser, wordless thought that gathers in the silence behind life. And the low, sweet, inarticulate voice of earth in the great passion of her sun-kissed trance ascended with its yearning undertone.
So these are things that one can only hear if one is very sensitive in some undisturbed place in nature. You know, that inner ear that listens to solitude when we're all alone, you know, leaning, self-wrapped, absorbed in itself, could hear without any boundaries the rhythm of another kind of thought, a wordless thought, a thought that's more intense than all these little thoughts that we have. There's a rhythm of that intenser, wordless thought gathering in the silence behind life. You know? Life goes on with the rumor, he says, of its speeding quest. You know? Life is always making a noise somehow. But behind life, there's this silence. And then that ear can hear the voice of earth. the low, sweet, inarticulate voice of Earth. Earth doesn't speak to us in words. She can't express herself clearly in words, but she has a voice. It's a very soft, low voice, very sweet voice. That voice is rising up with its yearning undertone. In the voice of Earth, there's always something unsatisfied. She's longing for something more. No? But there she is, the Indian Earth, in the height of summer, in the great passion of her sun-kissed trance. She's being embraced by the summer sun. She's in a kind of trance of ecstasy. So we see that in addition to everything else that he is, Aurobindo is a superb poet of nature. He can tell us things about nature that nobody else can tell us. Inexorably faithful to their task, they hold his nature's sequence in their guard, carrying the unbroken thread old lives have spun. Attendants on his destiny's measured walk, leading to joys he has won and pains he has called. Even in his casual steps they intervene. Nothing we think or do is void or vain. Each is an energy loosed and holds its course. The shadowy keepers of our deathless past have made our fate the child of our own acts, and from the furrows laboured by our will we reap the fruit of our forgotten deeds. But since unseen the tree that bore this fruit, and we live in a present born from an unknown past, they seem but parts of a mechanic force to a mechanic mind tied by earth's laws. Yet are they instruments of a will supreme, watched by a still, all-seeing eye above. A prescient architect of fate and chance, who builds our lives on a foreseen design, the meaning knows and consequence of each step, and watches the inferior stumbling powers. Upon her silent heights she was aware of a calm presence throned above her brows, who saw the goal and chose each fateful curve. It used the body for its pedestal. The eyes that wandered were its searchlight fires. The hands that held the reins, its living tools. All was the working of an ancient plan, a way proposed by an unerring guide. Across wide noons and glowing afternoons, she met with nature and with human forms, and listened to the voices of the world. Driven from within, she followed her long road, mute in the luminous cavern of her heart, like a bright cloud through the resplendent day. At first her path ran far through peopled tracts, admitted to the lion eye of states, and theatres of the loud act of man. Her carven chariot with its fretted wheels threaded through clamorous marts and sentinel towers, past figured gates and high dream-sculptured fronts, and gardens hung in the sapphire of the skies, pillared assembly halls with armoured guards, small fanes where one calm image watched man's life, and temples hewn as if by exiled gods to imitate their lost eternity. Often from gilded dusk to argent dawn, where jewel lamps flickered on frescoed walls, and the stone lattice stared at moonlit boughs, half conscious of the tardy listening night, dimly she glided between banks of sleep, at rest in the slumbering palaces of kings. Hamlet and village saw the fate wane pass, homes of a life bent to the soil it ploughs for sustenance of its short and passing days, that transient keep their old repeated course, unchanging in the circle of a sky which alters not above our mortal toil. Away from this thinking creature's burdened hours, to free and griefless spaces now she turned, not yet perturbed by human joys and fears. Here was the childhood of primeval earth. Here timeless musings, large and glad and still, men had forborne as yet to fill with cares. Imperial acres of the eternal sower, and wind-stirred grasslands winking in the sun, or mid green musing of woods and rough-browed hills, in the grove's murmurous bee air humming wild, or past the long lapsing voice of silver floods, like a swift hope journeying among its dreams, hastened the chariot of the golden bride. Out of the world's immense, unhuman past, tracked memories and ageless remnants came. Domains of light enfiefed to antique calm, listened to the unaccustomed sound of hooves, and large, immune, entangled silences absorbed her into emerald secrecy, and slow, hushed, wizard nets of fiery bloom environed with their coloured snare her wheels. The strong, importunate feet of time fell soft along these lonely ways, his tightened pace forgotten, and his stark and ruinous rounds. The inner ear that listens to solitude, leaning, self-wrapped, unboundedly could hear the rhythm of the intenser, wordless thought that gathers in the silence behind life, and the low, sweet, inarticulate voice of earth in the great passion of her sun-kissed trance ascended with its yearning undertone.